Hello everybody. I'm going to finish up working on the animations for my solar system. I've got everything nicely textured. All my planets are out of order right now. So I have loaded an image in a program called PureRef in the background here. Just from time to time I'm going to pop in here just to look at the order of things. Now, this is relatively to scale, certainly not the distances are to scale, but the sizes of the different planets are to scale. So we're going to stretch these up a little bit and be a little bit more artistic in our representation. So this is more of a scientific infographic than it is necessarily something that's hyper realistic. In another tutorial that I'm going to post next week, I'm going to work on the glow and the fire around the sun so it doesn't have this flat effect. I want to get something looking, kind of fiery around the sun, because right now when we do a render, we're going to see that the sun very, very dim right now, and it's just flat and kind of boring. While I'm on that point, I do want to make sure that all of my three objects, I'm just going to hop into wireframe mode. I've got this light out here, the one out on the exterior, that's the one that's going to emanate light out into the solar system. And then the one on the interior is intended to just push lumens light up onto the texture of the sun itself. So let me just pop the attribute editor up so I can get some light going here. And I'm currently sitting at an intensity of 200, so I'm gonna ramp that right up to say 1,000, get my Arnold running in real time over here. And yeah, just keep messing with that number until we're happy with it. I'm gonna double it to 2,000. How about 4,000? How about not 40,000? How about 4,000? That will do for now, and once more, with lighting, we do want to come in from time to time and mess around with it. Now, luckily, if I look in my outliner, I did take the time to nicely name my lights. So I do have in my light default light set, I've got my outer light and my inner light. So my outside light is intended to light the whole world, so I can quickly access that and then just amp those lumens up as well. So I'm going to go up to 4,000, and that's starting to push light all the way out to Jupiter there. Let's try even 6,000. And we're getting a lot of shine off of that ring of Saturn, so we might want to bring that specularity down. We'll see. Let's fly closer to the sun. I'm just going to grab the first planet in my collection, probably the wrong one, and I'm just going to tap the F key so that I can focus in on it and just take a look at what's going on with the Arnold render right now. Yeah, that's great. I'm going to orbit around the planet just to make sure that my shadows look cool. Looking pretty good. Should be a starker shadow on the backside, and as the renderer comes in, it's starting to do a job. So we could probably mess around a little bit more with the fall off of the shadows as time goes on. But for now, at least I can see everything in my scene. Cool. So those are the two light sources, the one inside the sun and the one just outside. Now I'm going to start stepping through one by one. Often when we're looking at our viewports with everything textured, it can be kind of tricky to pick up stuff that we want. So just to point out that there is this button here. So if you just want to see it in sort of like gray clay, you can do that and ignore the textures so you can see higher contrast. It just ignores the lighting and color right now. Okay. So first planet on the docket would be Mercury. And 10% of your mark, I'm going to look down this list and make sure everything's named nicely so that you would be easily able to grab, say, Mercury, for example. Now, if I tried to bring Mercury into the fray and put it near the sun, well, not a great situation right now, because when I create the new rings, when I create the new circular paths for the planets to move along, well, it would be really nice when I create them that they get generated at 0, 0, 0, XYZ, which is these darker lines here. So that's what it's going to orbit around. So wouldn't it be nice if the sun was there? So maybe at the outset, I'm just going to grab all of my planets, and I just clicked and held my left mouse button down to select a bunch of stuff, and then I'm just going to push those off like so. I don't need to group these objects, my sun and my two lights. I'm just going to make a box around them, click and left, hold down my left click and grab all three of those, and now I can just be very accurate by typing into my translate here 0, 0, and 0. So that's going to push all three of those objects to the center. In theory, there's one object. Let me see, let's try that again. Can I move y'all? I can move y'all as a group. I think it's because it's got light inner sun grabbed already, so 0. It's pushing them one at a time. So I'm just going to have to go in and select them. Luckily, they're named nicely. So put the sun at 0, and my outer light at 0, and my inner light at 0. Cool. So at least I know that the sun is hanging out right in the middle of my scene, and I'm going to keep it looking real, real big. Okay, so moving right along to Mercury, I'm going to bring it into the scene. And when we're animating on a path, there's one property that gets ignored by the auto-generated animation, and that's the scale. So right now it's really tiny. I'm going to bring it in close so that it looks, part of the scene, because I'm eventually going to have to frame this. So I can work on it this size, and I can resize it later after I've done all the animation, and I really don't have to worry about having constraints to the animation like I'm going to see here in a moment with my rotations. So this is the only one that I'm going to really spend some time on with you, and then I'm going to quickly jump over to the problem with Earth, and then sort of leave it up to the rest of your creative brains to figure out the rest of the solution. Try to keep this tutorial short. So I need a circle for this to follow. I need a circular path. So under curves, I'm going to create a new circle. It's hanging out on the inside of my sun. I can't see it, but I can tap the R key and scale it out. I'm just going to bring it out roughly there. Now, once the animation's complete, don't worry about it. You can rescale this circle, and the path will continue to constrain the object across its motion. Now, one problem right away, the final animation is going to be 480 frames long, and I'm currently looking at this entire scale on the bottom here, showing me all of the frames within my animation. So if I produce the animation right now, it's going to make my first and last keyframe on the path 480, because that's what I'm sitting at down here. And it's going to go around and around only once. It's not going to go around and around. It's going to go only around once, really slowly. So I might want this to actually have a few more rotations around it. So this is where we got to do a little bit of math. So 480, maybe I want it to go around 4 times. Now, we're not being scientifically accurate. We're just trying to be artistic here. So I'm going to say 480 divided by 4 is still 120. Cool, 120. So here's a little power tip. If I type in 120 in the second field beside the maximum number of frames, and I press return, and then I immediately create, and I have to toggle over here from modeling, up here, I gotta switch over to animation. As soon as I grab those 2 objects, I gotta click on the path, and then I have to click on the object. And then under constrain, I choose motion paths attached to motion path. Cool. And I look carefully, it says 120. So it's actually used this integer value, this number down here, as the maximum number of frames that are currently being seen in my playback to create those keyframes. It's actually really powerful. And I'm trying to burn this into my brain, but Control V Nope. Option V is play. And we're seeing that old issue again where it slows down and it speeds up, and that's not how planets move. So we got to get into a different interface here. We have to see our animation graph. And I think the easiest way to do that, in my mind, is just to hop into the animation workflow up here. You'll notice I keep pressing the space bar. Because it's burnt into my brain from other programs like Premiere and DaVinci that the spacebar is play and stop, the playhead for motion graphics and stuff. Even After Effects, it's the spacebar. But Maya's a little bit weird. It's Option V and then Escape. Escape will end the animation. It's kind of a weird keystroke, but yeah, if you just stick to working them down here, you'll be fine. So play and stop is down there. So yeah, I'm going to switch on over. You got to be really mindful all the time when I'm doing this. Where am I in my timeline? I'm going to go back to frame 1. I'm going to go into my animation workflow, and that's my workspaces up here. Hop into animation, and then I get to see this awesome grid down here that shows me the keyframes that I've currently created. It's awesome. As soon as I told the system to put the sphere onto the motion path, it just built this for me. So it created these 2 keyframes, one at frame 1 and one at frame 20, but it always does this nice ease in and ease out effect. So I got to highlight those 2 and press this button here, which is going to break the tangent. It's going to force the tangent to be straight, make it a linear interpolation. Click on that, and now we don't get that easing anymore. It's going to keep changing the increment of position and rotation equally over time. Cool. Now I might turn my textures back on so I can see what the heck is going on. And I do want to point out to you that now that we have got this object constrained to the path, we can see up here in our channel box layer editor over here, the 6 properties that are currently being changed by the path. So the path is actually dictating where the object is in XYZ and how it is meant to be rotated. So as we scrub the timeline, we can see all those values changing. Rotate X and rotate Y are not. Translate Y is not changing because it's not going up. So that's cool. Now we know that planets actually spin on their own axes. So right now, if I take a look at this, I'm going to hop on over into Modeling Expert View and Option. Ooh, let me get into perspective mode. Where's Persp? Persp is down there. I'm going to just Option V. We can see that the planet is not rotating around its own axis. So we now have to change its rotation over time, but we know that it's already constrained by the motion path. So this is what we do in the animation workflow over here. Animation. I'll hop back into perspective view. I'm going to grab my planet. Got to click on it, and I'm going to see over here we've got all of these things popping up in our channel box. So anything yellow is currently being governed by this motion path. If we want to start animating any one of these properties on our own by adding our own keyframes, we have to break the connection. So I'm going to deal with my rotations myself. I mean, 0, X, and 0, like X and Z are not changing at all, but Y is. But I may as well just highlight them all. So you can do that with the Shift key, Shift, click, click, and grab a bunch of things and right click on it. And then down here, we want to break the connection. So now we can start governing our own animation over time. which is really awesome. So right now, as it stands, when we go back to frame 1, and here's a power tip. Sometimes you can, by accident, go into the negative frames, right? Here's a -7. If you want to be perfect and fast, there's a little field down here where we can position the playhead very quickly, and I'll just type in 1. That tells the system to put the playhead exactly where I need it. And then I'm going to take a look at rotate Y. It's remembered that it was rotated 204, point weird. Okay, go be 0. Okay, be at 0. And then say over 20 frames, let's get this thing ripping. So at 20 frames, pops the playhead in over there. I'm going to say rotate 360 degrees. 360 degrees. Now nothing looks like it's changed because really 0 and 360 are identical the way they look. they look exactly the same because they're in the same position. Yeah, they are in the same position. They look identical, but they're not because the system is going to, over time, solve for spinning it all of those different degrees in between over 20 frames. So I just simply typed in 360 and then right-clicked on Rotate X and said Key Selected. Now I can jump back to frame 1. Oh, I made a mistake. It's still at 360 because I forgot here to right-click and Key Selected. So now I've got this nice curve. So it always does that kind of funky interpolation. It does that ease in and out. And that's not going to be great when we make this loop. So I need to grab those 2 keys, make it linear, and then I'm going to tell the curve, this is a curve, even though it's a straight line, it's still considered a curve. I'm going to tell the curve after, for infinity. That's what this means. It's kind of a fancy way of saying after this animation, for infinity. Forever and ever, or we can do this beforehand, but post this after this motion cycle, which means loop. So this is just a very, I mean, they could just have a button in here that says loop, but no, not Maya. Post infinity cycle. Very fancy way of saying do that over and over and over again. And for all intents and purposes, we are finished with Mercury. Let me see here. I'm going to highlight the sun. I'm going to highlight that. Shift A. Oh, that's going to show all. And just maybe press the play button. See what's going on here. So that thing's whipping on its own axis. It's spinning a whole lot. It's going to loop. I chose 20 frames to spin our good friend Mercury because 20 goes into 480. So it's going to loop perfectly throughout this animation. Now I might choose for another planet to go a lot slower, so we have to pick another number that divides perfectly into 480 to make that work just right. So let me press stop, and the best thing I can do right now, I'm going to save my scene as, and I'm going to give this another number. And this is just a good power tip as well. You know, I'm building out files in a list here so I don't lose any work if this file gets corrupted. So I'm just going to save that as new tutorial 5. And I think for all intents and purposes, let me just highlight that object. That's Mercury. Let me go check peer ref. Mercury. Cool. Now I do want to point out we did break that connection by highlighting all 3, and we right clicked, and then we looked down the list and we broke the connections. But you'll notice that one of the values is not connected. Like yellow means that it's being driven by the motion path. But these scales, they're not changing at all. I mean, we can animate them all we want. We can make them bigger or smaller, not that we would for a planet, but we can. But after the fact, you can, tap the R key, and if I want Mercury to be a bit bigger, that's okay. We'll scale it up. No big deal. And that's not going to change the animation in any way. I mean, it's made the planet bigger, but it's not going to affect the hard work that we just did there. Cool. So who's next? Venus. Venus and Earth are two totally different problems. Let me see how fast I can do Venus. I'm just going to go as quick as I can here. Curve, circle, R, scale it up. It's obviously got to be bigger than its partner. So we're looking at Venus. So I'm going to hop over here and grab the Venus object. W for the move key. Bring it on over. And then I'm going to select U and U. Now we have to do this constraint first. Under the animation pull down, constrain motion path attached to motion path, and then over here, turn my rotates off, break them, break the connections. Now, I can highlight this, excuse me, go back to frame 1 by typing it in down here. I'm going to set its rotate to 0. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to key selected. And then this time I'm going to think about what's 480 divided by 60. Does that go in nicely? It goes in 8 times. So I'm going to jump over to 60 frames. This one's going to rotate a little bit slower. And I'm going to hop on over for the rotate Y. I'm going to jump over to frame 60 here, frame 60, and then I'm going to type in rotate 360 degrees in 60 frames, and then right click and key selected. Now I've got a new path down here. I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to make it linear. That's perfect. And then I am going to head on over here, translate X. I'm going to check all of my different paths. There it is, the translate Y. So translate Y, I'm going to grab that and I'm going to make it linear. And sometimes you just got to kind of traverse down all of these different properties here just to take a look at all the paths to make sure they're doing their job. Now you two, you're going to tangents, curves, post-infinity cycle. Cool beans. Motion path value, make sure that's linear, double check, it is, and curves, post-infinity cycle. Now, the problem is when I press play, those two objects are just kind of hanging out like buds. That's not realistic at all. That's not how that works at all in outer space. So check this cool factor. This is all, parented to this ring here, to this circle curve. So I can tap the R key, the E key, and I can rotate that circle if I want to. So I can put it out over here. And now they're looking, it's looking a little bit more realistic. I don't know, because they would definitely be moving at different velocities, but you know what I'm getting at here. At least they're not sitting right beside each other looking silly. Now our next friend on the list is going to be tough, I think. I'm going to press stop and file save. The next one's going to be trickier than everything on this whole scene, except for Saturn. Saturn's going to be tricky too. So I'm just going to work on Earth. Let me get this guy out of the way. I don't even know who you are. You're Mars. Mars, you're probably back there somewhere. Now, don't forget, we've done all this hard work to our good friend Earth. We've got this cloud layer, and first and foremost, I think I want to make that, it's already a child object to Earth surface. And I know that to be true, so I want to grab Earth surface. I can wiggle it back and forth, and everything else is a child. And that's really good. We constrained that earlier on. But watch this cool factor. I can grab this object here. I'm going to go back to frame 1. I'm going to be accurate here by typing it in down in this field. I'm going to go back to frame 1. And I don't want my clouds to be whipping around, but I do want them to be animated on top of the surface of my Earth because they would be moving at a different rate. So, challenge. Rotate tool, E. I'm going to be rotating this on the Y, okay? And it currently says that its rotate is parented to the rotate of Earth. That is not important anymore because I want to rotate it independent of the Earth. Now I do want it to go faster than the Earth, which causes a bit of a math problem. So I'm going to say at frame 1, I'm going to break its connection. So it's now its own standalone attribute that I can animate. And 480 frames. So I'm going to do this over 120. 120 frames. I'm going to do this. So I'm going to set its rotate, the cloud layer, back to 0. And I want this to be slow-ish. So I need to bake in a keyframe. So don't forget, Maya, at frame 1, the clouds are definitely going to be at 0. And then at 120, over there, rotate. I want to change you to 360. And then I'm going to bake in another keyframe. Okay, cool. So it's rotating on its own axes. Now I had to go in there and click on the actual property to have it fill out my graph. And grab those two. They're not going to bounce around like that. Well, I don't know. Clouds are weird. Clouds are different than planets. They don't necessarily have to be linear, but let's just stick with being a linear interpolation so it doesn't slow down and speed up. But clouds can do all kinds of funky things. And then, same thing, we grab that curve and we tell it to do that forever, post-infinity cycle. Cool. The translate X, Y, Z for cloud layer, it's still adopting the position from our good friend Earth's surface. So it doesn't matter right now if we move Earth's surface to over here, the animation's still going to work for cloud layer. Cool. Very cool. Now what about our good friend, the Earth itself? Well, I'm going to grab Earth's surface and I'm going to go back to frame 1 and I'm going to animate it a lot faster than the clouds. See how this looks. Whoops, I typed 0 into translate Z. I actually, whoa, where did Earth clouds go? Oh, it's still there, good. Okay. And this is just a power tip. If I want to hide Earth clouds because I can't see what's going on, you can just tap the H key. So highlight Earth clouds, tap the H key, that hides it. You'll see it goes dark gray. You can highlight it over here when you want it back and press Shift H. And you got to do that every time you want to render it because it won't be there when you render. And that's true too about lights. Okay, so I'm going to hide the clouds and just focus on Meet Earth. So rotate on Y. At frame 1, I'm going to set it to 0 and bake a keyframe, key selected. And it's going to go a lot faster, and I know that 60 goes in quite nicely into frame 60 goes nicely into 480. Let's double check. 480 divided by 60. Always got to double check 8 times. Cool. So in my animation, it'll rotate 8 times. So I go over to frame 60. And I'm going to change its rotate to 360 degrees, and then key selected. Over here, had to do this with the clouds. I'm going to grab rotate Y, and something's going on funky here. Something's going on. I can't see all of my keys. Look at the scale. The scale's gone really wonky on me. Those are degrees because we're dealing with the rotate. Rotate Y, those are all degrees, so it's really zoomed down there. Anyway, so I can still, use the same mouse clicks that I use inside my viewports, inside of the animation graph. So Option, middle mouse click, I can move it around. I can, oh, weird. That's really weird. Anyway, it doesn't matter. All I need to do is grab those two keys, make it linear, and then curves, post infinity, cycle. So now it'll do its thing. So it's going quicker than the clouds. Turn the Earth clouds back on, Shift H after highlighting it from outliner, and that should be going a lot slower. Cool. Now, here's the big question. Here's the big old question. Can we, I'm gonna go back to modeling standard. Whoops, I'm moving the Earth. I'm pressing the wrong key. Okay, Command Z, undo, file save before I break everything. Option key, middle mouse button to move my world, and it closed down my attribute editor. And I'm going to create myself a new motion path. Curves, circle, R key to get my scale tool, and then I'm going to scale that up just outside. And then I'm going to click carefully on Earth's surface from here to highlight it. And this path here, holding down the Shift key. Come on. I can do it. I could have grabbed them from here as well. I could have just highlighted that and that. We're going to come back to the naming convention of these here. This is bad. This is very bad. But in the meantime, I've highlighted those two, the Earth surface and this new NURB circle, and I'm going to constrain it. Once more, I got to be in animation up here. Constrain it to its motion path, attached to the motion path. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, wait a minute here. Rotate already has an input connection. All right. I did the Earth's rotation. Oh, I broke it. I broke it. It already has some kind of constraint put on it already. So how do I fix this problem? Well, if I go into animation, over here, I gotta delete the animation that I just did. I should have done that beforehand. So I'm gonna grab Rotate Y, and I'm just gonna press the delete key. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. That just deleted Earth. So Rotate at Y. Is it gonna let me blow it away from in here? No. So I just need to grab these two keyframes and delete them. So that has removed the rotation from Earth's surface. So let's try that again. Earth's surface, Shift, click on the NURB circle. Nothing's controlling the Earth's rotation, so let's let the path dictate its rotation now. Constrain, motion path, attach. Yay, it worked. Hooray for everything. Super good. Super good. So, let's break down what just happened there. Because I had already started to change the Rotate Y before I attached it to the motion path, the system said, whoa, whoa, whoa. The motion path, would like to control rotate, and since I can't, I'm not gonna let you attach this object to it. So we need to do that after the fact by adding the planet, break the connection. Now I can go back to, might as well fix this linear, interpolate up, linear, curves, this is for the motion path, cycle, and then I can go back to frame 1 for the Earth, worry about Earth's surface, set its rotate. Now that I've broken its connection, I'm allowed to animate it, 0, right click, key selected, and then I said over 60 frames, 60, go around and around 360 times. Not times, degrees, silly. Right click, at frame 60 and key selected, we get a new property down here. I'll highlight that. Whenever we see a curve for this project, we want to make that straight. Curves, post-infinity cycle. File save. What the heck? And let's see what's going on. Now, once more, I've got this situation over here where these two planets are hanging out. So I'm going to grab this motion path and I'm going to rotate it about its own Y and just put it back somewhere. I'm just being artistic right now. It don't matter. I mean, if we wanted to get into details, you know, wow, there's lots. Like, the path is actually ovular in real space. You know, things move around the sun at different velocities. Arguably, for every trip that the Earth takes around the sun, it should spin 365 times, because we have 365 days in a year. Yeah, we could do all that math, but this is art. So let's just enjoy the time we've got making some art here. All right. So that's pretty much that. Now, one of our friends out here, Saturn. Now, I'm just going to work on that next. Where's Saturn relative to stuff? It's post-Mars, post-Jupiter, Saturn. So let's put in, so we've got Earth, Mars, Jupiter. So let's grab Mars. And I'm just going to move it for now. I'm just going to take it and move it into space. So I've got Jupiter in the right place. And then we got Mars, followed by the big old gas planet known as Jupiter. I need some space for this big old planet. We'll put that there. And then after that, we've got ourselves this beautiful planet known as Saturn. Cool. So I'm just sort of spacing these out right now just to, you know, give myself, I'll come back to adding these motion paths later. Before I do, very important, marks. Would you like to get some great marks, the best marks? Take your time. This is Mercury, and this is Mercury's path. It says NURB Circle 2. NURB Circle 2. Is my animation working right now? Let me just play. Oh yeah, yeah, things are working great. Cool. Very cool. The point I'm trying to make is I'd really like for you to take the time to highlight each one of these paths. So that's the path for, don't remember, Mercury. So this is path Mercury. Mercury. And this is path for Venus. Path Venus. And this is the third path. This is path Earth. Because later on, you might want to just grab one of these things and scale it up and put it in the right order. It's nice to have names that work. Okay, so let's put this planet, our good friend Saturn, somewhere relative to where it's going to be in the animation. Don't forget, we can always scale these up later if need be. And once more, you don't want to grab the rings because they're a child to the parent. So let me add a new circle. I'm going to tap the R key and scale it all the way out there. And this might be the only planet that I kind of leave alone in terms of its own rotation, because the rings look so cool. So I'm just going to grab Saturn and its path, and then I'm going to constrain motion path, attach to motion path, and then make this linear, make it loop, post-infinity cycle, file save scene. I'm going to grab its ring. I'm going to rotate it a bit after tapping the E key, put it out there in space. And I think I'm just going to leave it well enough alone because I want to enjoy the rings. I just want to enjoy the rings. Yeah. And I keep going back into this expert view so that I can get the biggest viewport that I can. And then I'm going to press Option V just to see what's going on. Yeah, that's awesome. Now I do have to raise the question, did it lose, escape key to stop it, did it flatten out the rings? It did. Because if you remember, I had it kind of tilted a little bit. So I think it's probably wise. I'm going to go into the animation workflow. I'm going to grab just Saturn. And I'm going to say, you know what? Leave the rotates well enough alone. Don't force the rotate of the rings of this planet, sorry, to flatten out anything, any of its children. So I'm just going to right click and I'm going to break it. I'm going to break that connection. I mean, it's still going to move along the path, and that's what we want, but at least now we can go in and we can make that cool little tilt. And we're allowed to do that. I'm just going to leave it well enough alone. Did we lose its planets? Or sorry, its moons? Where did its moons go? I'm not going to worry about its moons right now. I'm not going to worry about its moons. So modeling expert, just to see what's going on. And then option V. And yeah. I think I'm going to leave this tutorial here. I'm going to leave it at this. There's more work to be done. We got a camera that we got to get going in here. So I'm going to come back in later and add another tutorial about how to make the camera look awesome. And at the same time, I think what I'll do is add in some more detail about the sun. So this is enough for you to work on in the short run to get all of your planetary mechanics and motion happening. So have yourselves some fun. I'll get this up online as soon as possible. Have fun.